Nigeria's 2022 budget to further accelerate economic recovery while facilitating completion of critical projects.
President Buhari appoints board and management of NNPC Limited.
Two inmates confirmed dead at the Koshere Correctional Center in Ileife after a failed jailbreak.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall focus on the 2022 Appropriation Act.
Nigeria's 2022 budget of economic growth and sustainability was presented to the public yesterday, Wednesday, by the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Dr. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed. The budget prioritized defense and security, infrastructure and education.
Now, each of these sectors received a combined 5.5 trillion naira. And talking about defense and security, got 2.41 trillion, representing 15%. Infrastructure got 1.45 trillion, representing 8.9%.
And education received 1.29 trillion, which represents 7.9% of the national budget, while health got 820 billion naira, representing 5%, and social development and poverty eradication received 863 billion naira, representing 5.3% of the entire allocation.
Now, looking at the projected aggregate revenue of 9.01, and of course to fund the budget with the non-oil sector, providing 65% of those funds.
Now, the federal government is raising the revenue to GDP ratio from the current 8% to 9% to 15% by 2025, while provision is being made for petroleum subsidy in the first 6 months of 2022 to address an outstanding 24 months arrears of the, to military pensioners is also included.
And the 2022 budget is also seeking to continue the reflationary approach of 2021 in line with the National Development Plan. Now, the private sector is also expected to contribute 398 trillion naira to that plan.
An oil price benchmark of $62, rather US dollars, that is per barrel, as well as a daily oil production estimate of 1.88 million barrels per day is projected in the document. Clear?
And in terms of expenditure, 17.13 trillion naira is projected for 2022, with 16.19 trillion naira for recurrent expenditure, while capital expenditure will go up 5.96 trillion naira.
A deficit of 6.39 trillion naira, representing 3.46% of GDP, is also projected for 2022.
All right. Now, 21% of the total expenditure at 3.61 trillion naira will service the country's debt profile. Now, of course, recall that the Finance Minister, Zainab Ahmed, had explained that the challenge before Nigeria isn't her debt, but revenue generation.
Now, the impact of the Finance Act in the implementation of the budget is also important. For instance, it will, among other things, provide a 10 naira a litre excise duty on non-alcoholic beverages on health grounds.
So the 2022 National Plan, according to the public breakdown yesterday, is carefully crafted to do three things. First, to accelerate growth, deepen initiatives for diversified growth, and foster sustainable development.
The Appropriation Act 2022 is our focus on Good Morning Nigeria today. Thanks for joining us. We are reaching you on the network service of the NTA. I am Yusuf Nadab Usman.
And I am Claire Adilabo Abdulrazak. I'm sure this is sounding like a foreign language to all of us, but don't worry, we're going to break everything down to your understanding so that you follow the budget, you follow the money, and of course you follow development. I am Claire Adilabo Abdulrazak, welcoming you once again, of course joining my colleague Yusuf. We will have our complimentary segments in the course of the program. Of course, the news will precede it. There will be newspaper review, and if we do have time, we'll take on sports and developments on the foreign news. Ifoma Ojenta is brought from her holiday breaks. Ijoma, a warm and... Sorry. Ifoma and Ijoma. It's almost the same thing. Am I right?
They are not the same.
It's not the same. They are not the same. Good morning, Claire and Nadabo.
The same anyway.
It's good to see you both this new year. Good morning, Nigeria, and here's the morning news. The 2022 budget is expected to further accelerate the recovery of the Nigerian economy and facilitates the completion of critical projects, as well as improve the general living conditions of citizens. Minister of Finance, Budgets and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, while giving a breakdown of the budget, pointed out that it reflects the key execution priorities and strategies of the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025.
So without the government-owned enterprises' retained revenue, the federal government return revenue will be 9.01 trillion. To promote fiscal transparency, accountability, comprehensiveness, and allocation, we have indicated for the first time in the 2022 budget the allocations to TETFund. In the past, it was not previously recorded as revenue. And the budgets of 63 government-owned enterprises are fully integrated in the 2022 budget. In aggregate, 35% of the projected revenues is to come from the oil-related sources, while 65% is to be earned from the non-oil sources. Again, this is underscoring the fact that government revenues now are largely from the non-oil sector of the Nigerian economy.
President Muhammadu Buhari has appointed the board and management of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited. Senator Margaret Chuba Okadibu from Southeast is the chairman of the board, while Mele Kolo Kyari will serve as Chief Executive Officer and Umar Ejia is the Chief Financial Officer. Other board members are Dr. Tajuddin Umar, representing Northeast, Lami Ahmed for North Central, Muhammad Lawal, Northwest, Henry Obi, Southeast, while Constance Harry Marshall is representing South-South, and Pius Akinyelure, Southwest. A statement by the Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Femi Adesina, states that the appointments take effect from the date of the incorporation of the NNPC Limited. Also appointed are Executive Commissioners of the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission. They are Dr. Nuhu Habib from Kano, Executive Commissioner Development and Production, Dr. Kelechi Onyekachi of Webu, Imo, Executive Commissioner Economic Regulations and Strategic Planning, Tonlanga Roland John, Delta, Executive Commissioner Health, Safety, Environment and Community, and Jide Adeola Kogi, Executive Commissioner, Corporate Services and Administration. New appointees are the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority are Francis Alabo Rivers, Executive Director, Hydrocarbon Processing, Mustafa Lamode Adamawa, Executive Director, Health, Safety, Environment and Community, Mansour Kulia Kanu, Executive Director, Midstream and Downstream Gas Infrastructure Fund, Bashir Sadiq Sokoto, Executive Director, Corporate Services and Administration, and Zainab Gobir Kwara, Executive Director, Economic Regulations and Strategic Planning. For Midstream and Downstream Infrastructure Fund, new council members are Efyong Abia from Akwa Ibom, Bomboy Ahmed from Adamawa, and Abdullahi Bukar Katsina. Senator Lekong Balogun has been endorsed and approved by the kingmakers of the Olubadan in council as the 42nd Olubadan of Ibadan land. A former Senator Otun Olubadan Lekong Balogun was an administrator and head industrial relations, recruitment, scholarship planning and development at Shell Petroleum Development Company. 2 inmates at the Correctional Center Koshere in Ile-Ife have been confirmed dead, while 2 others are receiving treatment at Obafemi Awolowo University Teaching Hospital Complex following an attempted jailbreak at the center. The Controller of Corrections, Osun State Command, Amoran Olariwaju, disclosed this while briefing newsmen on the incident.
Are allowed to exercise within 1 hour per day. So some of these inmates were opened out for them to take fresh air and go in. Some of them took the opportunity, don't know their grievances, and they attacked the officers on duty. Then, in the course of trying to ensure safety, and then they were still proving stubborn, and in the course we had about 4 casualties. So the 4 casualties took them to the hospital for treatment, but on getting there we learned that 2 died, while 2 have been responding to treatments.
Police training institutes must instill in the new recruits the core values of professionalism, relate friendly with the civilian population, and shun corrupt practices. Inspector General of Police Usman Alkali Baba gave the directive in a meeting with commandants of police training institutes in Abuja.
Our plan is to in place a new training regime that must impart the virtues of professionalism, knowledge, discipline, confidence, and critical decision-making potentials in the recruits. As custodians and guardians of recruits, you are to provide mentorship by displaying high level of ethical standards.
That's the news for now. Good morning. Nigeria continues with Nadabo and Claire after this break.
The Nigerian aviation sector is rapidly growing with the construction of new international airport terminals in several regions of the country. The new Murtala Mohammed International Airport has an estimated passenger increase of 30 million annually and 15 million for Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja. Malam Aminu Kano International Airport is also expected to open new frontiers for the region with more travel capacity for the annual Hajj, while the new Akanu Ibiam International Airport, Enugu, avails more business opportunities connecting the industrial cities in the region to the world. These new terminals beat world-class standards with enabling infrastructure that aid air travel, tourism, and the eventual growth of the country's GDP.
Open up commerce and, of course, link us to international societies.
People from international community will come here to do business, and then that will bring in more revenue to the state.
Now, distances can be seamlessly covered as Nigeria keeps raising its bar to suit global infrastructure standards.
The ever-busy ancient city of Onitsha is a commercial hub with millions of commuters seamlessly linking other states daily for business, leisure, and other purposes. To upscale its road network, the construction of a 1.6-kilometer-long second Niger bridge, including a 10.3-kilometer highway furnished with other infrastructure, has been in motion by the federal government. This project will ease congestion on the existing 56-year-old Onitsha bridge and boost the economic capacity of the state as it easily connects to other parts of the country. The completion of the world-class second Niger Bridge Onitsha will be one of the many proud moments of the state, its people, Nigerians, and foreign investors. Onitsha, which hosts the largest market in Africa, is geared up to boast of an impressive road network. Once again, these moments are made alive by the federal government, and it is deserving of all the applause.
The 2022 Armed Forces Remembrance Day celebration is here again. The Nigeria Armed Forces work tirelessly day and night to give us peace to go about our businesses. Some have paid the supreme price. Should we forget the families and loved ones they left behind? No.
I am therefore privileged to honor these veterans who devoted most of their lives, active lives, to securing the nation and the world at large.
So, let's support the Nigerian Armed Forces and their families, corporate organizations, government agencies, parastatals, and individuals. Let's show our love and support for our armed forces. They are our heroes. Buy the Armed Forces Remembrance Emblem and donate into the Armed Forces Remembrance Emblem Appeal account. We love you, and your labor and sacrifice will not be in vain for spilling your blood for us to live.
From the heart of the Federal Capital Territory
to the ancient city of Kano,
from the sprawling rooftops of Ibadan
to the bustling markets of Aba and the creeks of the Niger Delta, you really can't beat the reach.
Over the years, we have kept going, keeping you informed, educated, and entertained.
And how have we survived in the very challenging year?
Because of our pillars of support, namely the 3 tiers of government: ministries, departments, and agencies,
corporate bodies and advertisers,
religious bodies,
civil society groups,
political parties, and most importantly, you, our esteemed viewers. Together, we made 2021 great.
And together, we shall make 2022 greater. Thank you.
From all of us here at NTA, your season's greetings and a prosperous new year.
It's Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA. Now, Nigeria is set to service $3.4 billion emergency funding loan taken from the International Monetary Fund. Let's now join Kule Adeye for details of this and business news.
Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning Zainab Ahmed says Nigeria will begin to service the $3.4 billion emergency funding loan it took from the International Monetary Fund (IMF). The minister said these are the 2022 budget presentation.
We have a 5-year period within which to pay, starting from 2022, and we're paying it over a 5-year period. So it's going to start from 2022. I think it's in, is it June also? Something like that, about June. Yes, there is a repayment schedule that will go by. It's not annual payments, it's quarterly repayments.
The International Monetary Fund had approved $3.4 billion in emergency financial assistance for Nigeria to support the oil exporters' response to the coronavirus pandemic in 2020. And the equities market closed on a bullish note on Wednesday. The oil share index climbed 1.00% to close at 43,476.75 points, and equity capitalization appreciated to 23.4 trillion naira. 1.24 billion shares worth 42.9 billion naira exchange hands in 4,032 deals. Boa Foods, Wema Bank and Transcorp are the most traded stocks at the end of the day's transaction. With business news, I'm Kule Adeye.
All right, many thanks, Kunle, for the business news. Coming up next is the newspaper review.
Welcome, Bayo.
Thank you. Good morning, Yusuf. Good morning, Claire. And good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, let's get started with the Punch newspaper here and then see the stories there, and especially on the front page. From the top, we can really see that there are some few stories there. Can we have the Punch newspaper, please? And the story goes as such: debt servicing gulps 76% of revenue. Experts Buhari disagree on borrowings. Get details of that on page 28. Finally, FG releases Gazette declaring bandits terrorists. FG releases, federal government that is releases Gazette declaring bandits terrorists. Details on page 9. And on pages 2 and 5, Magodo, Southwest governors, sons attack Malemi, IG, AGF faults alleged impunity. Get details of that on pages 2 and 5. Now, coming down a little bit to the right, we can see the story on Oshibanjo there, who plans meeting with NLC over subsidy removal, transport palliative, page 27. The Senate props Bureau for Public Enterprise, that is BP, alleges unremitted $679.4 million rent on ports concession, page 27. The big story, or the main story here on the Punch today, January 6, is PDP. Others kick as Buhari dismisses state police, insist on grazing routes. PDP, others kick as Buhari dismisses state police, insist on grazing routes. Details on page 2. And the riders are opposition party, Afenifere, carpet president for saying state police not an option. The second one is Ohaneze plans meeting. President dismisses plea for Nnamdi Kanu's release. And then the third rider is if we have to go back to grazing routes to address farmers' hardest clashes, says Buhari. Now moving down, get ex-soldiers protest, plan to picket Defense Ministry January 15. Then you can see them there with placards there. Get details of that on page 8. That's the photo story, I believe. On page 7, Northern youths back Oshibanjo to succeed Buhari, oppose same-faith candidacy. Northern youths back Oshibanjo to succeed Buhari, oppose same-faith candidacy, on page 7. On page 4, workers, others flee as gunmen kill 2 Niger guards, kidnap Chinese expatriates. Still on page 7, Kano College expels 12 students for exam malpractices, threatens litigation. At the foot of the page, page 21, that's presidency, 100 clerics, 1,000 church leaders declare 3-day fast for Bello. On pages 4 and 5, SFU police ambush, arrest Ogun landlords over land dispute, still in court. And finally on page 12, my wife, children visited my son in U.S. prison recently, and they were Bomber's father, Mutalla. Clear?
Oh, yes, Notable, thank you. The Nation is leading with an excerpt from Mr. President's interview with Channels Television yesterday, and it says, Buhari, why I won't disclose my preferred 2023 candidate, and it comes with a rider, decision to protect likely successor. I will sign electoral amendment bill when reworked. But there's an interesting quote right in the middle there, and I'd just like to read it out. It says, I don't have any favorite for 2023, and if I do, I won't reveal his identity, because if I do, he may be eliminated before the election. So I better keep it secret. So, but one thing we do know, Bayo, from this quotation is that the president's successor is a male gender.
Well,
you said he.
He used the word he.
He.
So there's a clue there.
Very good deduction.
All right.
Where do we start?
Okay.
From that interview? From that interview, the president also indicated his readiness to assent to the electoral amendment bill after the National Assembly have made necessary adjustments. The president actually said that on during an interview with a television network that there should be options. Changes should include consensus candidate and indirect primary options. the president indicated that he has no special interest in the 2023 elections. He declared, I believe that whoever wins the poll should be sworn in and should be the next leader of Nigeria. Talking about if he had a preferred candidate, Claire has already indicated that his preferred candidate is a male, but he refused to nail him in the name. But
it's not me. It's a deduction.
It's your deduction
from the nation's headline.
Well, we heard it from the horse's mouth. Well, there was also the issue that was raised about the leader of the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, President Muhammad Buhari, said, there is one institution that I will not interfere with. That is the judiciary. Kanu's case is with the judiciary. He added, I wonder when he was safe in Europe, maligning this administration, I thought he wanted to come and defend himself of the accusations. So we are giving him an opportunity to defend himself of our system, not hauling abuses from Europe as if he was not a Nigerian. Let him come here with us and criticize us here. Nigerians know that I don't interfere with the judiciary. Let him be listened to. But those who are saying that he should be released, no, we cannot release him. When asked about Nigeria's youths, he says that, I wish that when they go to school, work hard, earn a degree, they don't go on to expect that government will give them a job. He said those days are gone. Like in the past, the colonial days, when you graduate, you are given a car, a house, and you go to work 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. That has passed. So the emphasis now is you must work hard for yourself.
Indeed, we will be transmitting, the special exclusive interview with the president on the NTA network today. So I'm sure we have much more to hear from Mr. President, that we haven't heard even from the ones. But one thing I'd like you to speak to is the gazette that classifies bandits as terrorists. It's out, and I know that the Minister of Justice and Attorney General was on this program, yes, a few days ago.
Well, the Gazette was published yesterday.
Yes.
Yes. It's volume number 212, volume 108. Government notice of number 169. It was issued at Lagos and is dated November 29th. From that Gazette, what it now, the order is declaring the activities of Yambindiga and Yan Ta'ada and similar groups in any part of Nigeria as terrorists and illegal. The Gazette prescribes their existence and restrains any person or group of persons from participating in any manner whatsoever, in any form, in the activities of such group. So, now, this was the mere administrative formality. The Federal High Court, presided over by Justice Taiwo, had actually, since November 25th, given that declaration, following an ex parte application by the Office of the Attorney General.
Yes, so what remains now is whether or not the weapons, for which this was granted will now be deployed.
Well, the restraint before was that until these bandits were classified as terrorists, in other words, they will be equated like military men who are at war. You couldn't use some of the armament that has been provided for Nigeria. But now, the coast is now clear that they will be treated as combatants in the field. There is also another controversy that has been raised. It's regarding the land at Magodo that has been
that's what I wanted you to speak about, to speak to. Outrage over CSP's refusal to obey Sanwo-Olu, that is Governor of Lagos State. Southwest Governors AGF clash. And I listened to the video on social media yesterday. Well, let's hear your opinion.
Well, I don't have an opinion. What is reported there is that the chairman of Southwest Governors Forum, Governor Rotimi Akeredolu, described the brazen assault as indecent. And he actually said that this is a gross moratorium of the rapprochement between federal units and the federal security agencies. And what happened? There is a Supreme Court ruling regarding an estate, Magodo there. And the Office of the Attorney General and Inspector General of Police instructed policemen to go and enforce that order. So the governor was alerted and he went there and said that the policemen should evacuate, should leave the place. And the chief superintendent of police who led them said that, Ogasa, it is you that can speak to the Oga. As far as I'm concerned, I'm under instructions to carry out instructions to enforce the ruling of the Supreme Court. And so so many people felt that it was an affront to the governor. But the governor, in his wisdom, already has set up a committee. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu set up a committee to identify available plots and additional plots at agreeable areas in Lagos that will resolve the conflict between the Shangisa Association of Landlords and the representative of Magodo Phase 2. So apparently, there's a way out of it. But you can never throw away politics in any situation.
But what crime has the CSP committed?
Well,
is it a crime of not putting a call to the IG, who is his very high superior, or is it a crime of not leaving, you know, when the governor ordered him to call this man?
Well, military persons or uniform officers obey the last order from their superiors. They were given order to enforce a Supreme Court ruling at an estate. So they went there. The governor came and said, okay, I am the governor of the state. Please leave this place. All right? We will sort this out.
But
and
the
officer says, I'm sorry, sir. I cannot talk to those superior officers. You are in a better position to speak with them. As far as I'm concerned, I'm here to carry out an order. And a lot of people felt that was an affront.
But they're clear and you can see now the thick line, you know, of authority between the chief executive and then federal forces in this regard, talking about federal, you know, the police force, the military, and whatever, which is generally controlled by the federal government. And you can see how the state police issue can come into it, how this separation of powers could be, and the rest of them. But all the same, seems like orders have been followed here. And
well, yes, orders were given, orders were being followed, and apparently now there's a conflict of order from the higher authority, federal authority, with the governor's instructions as against a court order, a Supreme Court order.
Bayo, thank you. We have to talk money today. And I'm told that our guest...
And we need more time to do that.
Yes, our guest is already in the studio. So you have a good day. Listen, maybe you will have one or two investment tips.
Money is important.
Money is important. All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be talking about the 2022 Appropriation Act in just a moment.
The 157-kilometer Lagos-Ibadan Railway is the first double-track standard gauge railway to be built in West Africa. The Mobolaji Johnson train station is a masterpiece, an infrastructure that is gradually becoming an iconic building in Lagos State. The modern facilities put the station on a world map of train stations. Likewise, other new train stations across the country built to world-class standards. The train and its convenience is indeed an admirable effort, with commendations from Nigerians.
This is a station that we have to commend the federal government for putting a beautiful face, empowering us in Lagos State, not only in economic and political arena.
I can say that I'm really impressed with the infrastructures in place. Kudos to the Minister of Transportations, kudos to the federal government.
Truly, good things are coming out of Nigeria, and the federal government is deserving of all the applause.
The Digital Switchover project, which is commonly referred to as DSO, which entails television channels switching from analog to digital broadcasting. It's one of the biggest projects embarked upon by this administration. Branded as Free TV, offers its viewers about 60 digital channels, including sports, music, movies, and news. The federal government has licensed about 23 set-top box manufacturers. 7 of them have self-production, employing several thousands of people. We've made it now compulsory for all stations in Nigeria to only broadcast productions made in Nigeria for products which are produced in Nigeria.
African Cup of Nations starts on the 9th of January 2022 on NTA, powered by AfroSport. For sponsorship and advertisements, contact us on 090-9890-6913 or 090-3513-2838.
Welcome back. This morning we're discussing the Appropriation Act 2022, and as a prompt for our conversation, let's take this background put together by Joseph Otsen.
It is christened the Budget of Economic Growth and Sustainability. The 17.12 trillion naira budget is said to be critical to completion of vital infrastructure for sustainable development. It has 17.13 trillion naira projected for expenditure in 2022, out of which 16.19 trillion naira is budgeted for recurrent and 5.96 trillion naira for capital. Debt service is taking 21% of total expenditure at 3.61 trillion naira. Review of the sectorial allocation indicates education, health, security, infrastructure, and social development are taking the highest chunk of the budget. Defense and security got 2.14 trillion naira, representing 15%. Infrastructure, 1.45 trillion naira, that is 8.9%. Education, 1.29 trillion naira, representing 7.9%. Health, 820 billion naira, 5%. Social development and poverty eradication, 863 billion naira, representing 5.3% of the entire allocation. The federal government is projecting aggregate revenue of 9.01 trillion naira to fund the budget, with 65% of the fund to come from non-oil sector. A benchmark price of $62 per barrel has been projected in 2022 to strengthen the budget.
In aggregate, 35% of the projected revenues is to come from the oil-related sources, while 65% is to be earned from the non-oil sources. Again, this is underscoring the fact that government revenues now are largely from the non-oil sector of the Nigerian economy.
The Finance Act will, among other things, help in the implementation of the budget, as well as the National Development Plan, launched in December 2021. To also guide its implementation, the private sector is expected to contribute 398 trillion naira to the National Development Plan.
That was Joseph Otsen giving us a background report into our conversation. And our topic again is the Appropriation Act 2022. We have in our studio the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, to, of course, give us a deeper understanding of the implications of all the assumptions and the breakdowns. We'd like to welcome you, Madam. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Nigeria.
And compliment of the season.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Also joining us for this conversation is a familiar face, a friend of the house, Professor Uche Uwaleke. He's a professor of capital markets, Nasarawa State University, President, Association of Capital Market Academics of Nigeria. Again, Prof, would like to welcome you and thank you for obliging us your time.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, and Amado.
Nadabo.
Good morning, Nigerians, and Happy New Year.
All right. Also joining us from Ilorin via Zoom is Professor Gafar Ijaiya. Thank you so much for joining us, Prof. This Good Morning, Nigeria.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I want to also say good morning to our viewers.
All right, Professor Gafar is a development economist of the Department of Economics, University of Ilorin. Now, gentlemen and lady, good morning once again. Compliments of the season. Let me start with, the Honorable Minister so that we can now see what we have in stock in 2022 as far as spendings are in this country. Congratulations once again. congratulations for having, putting in place the, 12 months January to December cycle of the budget. And that's a great thing we must really take note of. For a start, let's look at the budget and then say how good or how different it is from the one of last year, 17.3. Give us the key areas of this budget for a start so that people can now say what exactly or why you are headed this year.
Well, thank you very much, Nadabo, and thank you also, Claire, for inviting me and giving me an opportunity to speak on the 2022 budget. But you mentioned how the 2022 budget compares to last year. So I think a good starting place is always to just report briefly on the performance of the 2021 budget. The 2021 budget, and the numbers are not yet complete, we're still reconciling. On terms of aggregate revenue, we generated 5.51 trillion naira, which is 74% of our prorated target. Remember that as at 2018, the average budget performance was 50%. So we'll be making progress on an incremental basis. And also, of this revenue that has been generated, only 53% of it is oil and gas revenue. So the balance is non-oil sources, and specifically the non-oil sources, company income tax, VAT, outperformed our projections in the budget to the tune of 18.8%. We keep saying this so that people appreciate the fact that the Nigerian economy is now truly diversified, that the largest proportion of the funding of government's national budget, the national budget, is coming from the non-oil sector. And this means the growth aspirations that we have and the growth that we're seeing will be a sustainable one, inshallah, because we're not depending largely on the vagaries of the oil and gas market. So having said that, I'll now move on to the 2022 budget, which has been signed into law on the 31st of December by His Excellency Mr. President, alongside our finance bill. The finance bill is a very important instrument because it's designed to facilitate the implementation of the 2022 budget. And also, apart from the fact that we've returned the budget cycle to January to December, we've also now instituted the culture of having finance bills to support the implementation of the budget. These bills are helping us to provide incremental reforms in the various fiscal laws that we have in the country, helping us to realize this very good performance of revenues that we're now seeing. So I think, as earlier reported, the size of the budget is 17.13 trillion. It's going to be. It is the largest budget that we have made so far. 35% of that budget is capital. And also, this is the first time we're attaining that level, at least since this administration from 2015 to now. This is the first time we're able to make up to 35% capital contribution. But our budget is still largely recurrent. So 65% is recurrent expenditure. A large chunk of that 65% is personnel costs as well as debt service. While we keep working to increase revenue, we're also working to reduce the cost of governance by trying to block leakages, but also subsequently by revising and reviewing the number of agencies that we have in government. There is an exercise that is going on. Yes, the famous Oresanya report has not been implemented, but it's part of the major tools that we're using in this revision process. So there will be agencies that will be collapsed. There will be some agencies that will cease to exist. Mr. President has directed that there must be special attention on how staff will be taken care of during this process. And also, the 2022 budget was built. The foundation of it is the new National Development Plan, the NDP, for 2021 to 2025. Again, putting paid to Mr. President commitments to link budget with plan. That's why the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning was created, because in the past we've had a lot of very good plans, and we still have very good plans, but the link to the budget and the implementation of the budget based on the plan has been missing for a long time. So the President created this, ministry, and our first point of call is the plan. Then we do an MTEP, which also conforms with the plan. Then we draw the budget from the MTEP. So there's a link from our plans. And also, the current plan that that was just commissioned by Mr. President has a list of projects for the next 5 years. So there's a very large volume 2 of this of the plan, and we have asked agencies to make sure that all the projects that they will need are listed within the plan, so that when we do the budget, the projects must come from that plan. Again, that is just to reassure Nigerians that we are tracking the implementation of the plan, and that the budgets are driven by this plan process. We've done a lot of things in terms of infrastructure in the country. So this budget is designed to complete a good number of ongoing projects. We have had to continue to borrow, and we're making sure that the borrowings we're making are applied for this major infrastructure project, and in some cases also to develop human capital. For example, to improve our healthcare infrastructure and an educational sector tools and equipment, so that we have so that we can upskill the capacity of our people to be able to participate more in the global economy. We've also continuously seen that apart from the fact that the Nigerian economy is diversified, that the ICT sector and the services are the largest contributors to the growth of the Nigerian economy. The ICT sector, driven particularly by the telecommunication sector, is the largest contributor next to agriculture to the Nigerian economy. Agriculture also continues to grow on an incremental basis. We hope that the growth will fasten in subsequent years. We've seen the effect of the growth in the agriculture, the effect of insecurity that we're having, some of the challenges in the production of the agricultural sector. But despite that, there are still people, Nigerians, that have remained resilient in staying with the agricultural sector. We're seeing increasingly more and more production, not just production, but processing of products, which is where we have to go. We're trying to move away from just producing products and raw materials and exporting them, but to processing them to enable consumption in Nigeria, but eventually also to go to export. But while the budget size is 17.13 trillion, the revenue that we had projected is about 10.5 trillion. And that means we also, again, have a deficit budget. This time around, the deficit is 6.3 trillion, while there is some small components of privatization process and recoveries that we project can be made of funds that are out there. We are largely still going to fund this budget from borrowing. Borrowing both locally as well as externally. But I must also emphasize that the total size of the budget, the borrowing component is about 21% of the budget. And on its own, that is a healthy threshold. If you have a budget that is 21% in debt service, it's not a bad threshold to be in. The total size of government of Nigeria's budget today is still within a very healthy, sustainable limit. The problem we have is the problem of revenue, because you need revenues to service the debt, to be able to pay salaries and pensions, and to be able to run government. So even though our Fiscal Responsibility Act specifies that you can borrow, but borrowing must be for capital expenditure and human capital development, we're struggling with being able to manage the liquidity requirements of government, because the revenues, even though they're increasing, are still not at a healthy threshold. So just to assure Nigerians that President Muhammadu Buhari keeps authorizing us to borrow, but he ensures that the borrowing we're making is for capital projects and major projects you can see around the country that have been funded by borrowing. These projects are important for us to do now to be able to grow the economy on a sustainable basis. We cannot wait until our revenues catch up before we provide power, before we build the roads that are critical for the ease of doing business, before we provide rail lines and also upgrade our airports. So that's what we've been using for the borrowing, and these investments will pay up, because these are investments that will themselves increase revenue for the country, not necessarily for government, because when businesses are spending less in terms of their operations, their performance will be better, they will have more profit, and then they'll be able to pay more taxes to government. So it's a, if you like, it's a circle, and it keeps going around and coming around. But I just want to assure Nigerians that we're borrowing responsibly. On a quarterly basis, we're keeping track of the levels of the borrowing and also the utilization of the funds. And our debt management practices is guided by a debt management policy. We also have a debt management board that is chaired by His Excellency, the Vice President, and a full debt management office with skilled professionals. So we're also tracking the debts of the states, and the states borrow, they can only borrow externally by the approval through the federal government. And so we check their revenues and their capacity to service the debts, because we see their FAC, and we also have information on their IGR. So we give approval when we're satisfied that they actually have headroom to be able to borrow.
Okay.
Just stop
thank you, Honourable Minister. You said so much about in fact, you've been talking about the 2022 budget, for quite a while now. Yesterday, was the climax, where you had to do all the breakdown. I'd like to draw you, back to 2021, because you have, scored, budget implementation last year very high. But I want to know, where did the strength come from? Did we do well in terms of revenue, projected revenue, drive in 2021? How well did we do in that area?
Well, in terms of expenditure, maybe I didn't mention that the expenditure as of November is 94.5% in terms of performance, which means we're nearing 100% funding of the budget. We released about 3.6 trillion naira for capital projects alone. Personnel, pensions, debt service, 100% fully performed. So we have been on course. Over the last 2 years, our budget's performance is near 100%. What is new is that the revenue performance is very impressive. For the first time in the history of this country, our independent revenues crossed the 1 trillion naira mark. As at 2017, the independent revenues were 200 and something billion. And this we have been able to push and stretch till we have now passed the 1 billion mark. I remember that every time we do the budget, people will criticize us and say this independent revenues you're putting is not realistic, these agencies cannot deliver them. But we kept insisting that the capacity is there, that we just have to collectively block the leakages and push and stretch the agencies. And this has happened largely due to the increased efficiency in monitoring, monthly revenue reconciliations that we do under a Presidential Revenue Reconciliation Committee, but also due to the provisions of the Finance Act 2020, which has specified that the government-owned enterprises revenue to expenditure ratio should not be more than 50%, which means the agencies, whatever revenue they collect, cannot spend more than 50% of that revenue. And then we saw just our revenues just ballooning, picking up. And what that means is, and these agencies are still operating, what that means is there was a lot of wastages and leakages within the system. We came under a lot of pressure from agencies saying they are not able to operate at that level, but somehow they have been. The legislature, I must say, has been very, very supportive in this revenue drive in this regard. Some agencies had wanted to go back to the legislature and get some exemptions when they couldn't get exemptions from us, but it's working. So far, the agencies are operating at the same levels in which they used to operate. And also, in addition to this ratio, the president now gave us approval to take on a monthly basis 25% of every revenue that is collected by a revenue-generating agency, just upfront through the TSA. So we don't wait until the accounts are reconciled and finalized before we get that. We get at least that 25% coming upfront. We did backlog reconciliations and recover a lot of the revenues that were not previously, and it's still an ongoing process. We expect that 2022 will be much better than 2021 as the efficiencies really kick in and settle down into the process. Capital expenditure, on the other hand, even though I said we released 3.6 trillion, the utilization is not at the level we had expected. And that means that agencies were holding capital funds that are not yet spent. So we went through Mr. President and we got approval to ask for from the National Assembly for extension of the capital component of the budget from 31st of December, which is when the 2021 budget expires, to 31st of March. And this Assembly also...
To enable them spend?
To enable them utilize. Because the purpose of these funds, we borrowed these funds, by the way, so that you have cost of borrowing, running, and the intention of the borrowing is to make sure that the funds are used for capital projects. So we got this extension so that the funds the agencies have more time to deploy for capital. So there are a number of reasons: delay in pickup of activities due to COVID-19, but the most critical reason was delay in procurement. So our procurement system has been very, very problematic.
But there's also talk about delay in releases.
Delay in releases because we were also tracking utilization. So we watch to see that agencies have used their funds. We actually do the releases in a staggered manner. And we make an assessment, okay, if you've used up to 50% of what we gave you, you're probably ready for more. But at the end of the year, we released the funds to everyone anyway. So we have this extension. And we've also done some improvements in the public procurement process. In the last finance bill, we had increased the advance payment threshold from 15% to 30% through the Finance Act. We also just maybe about a month ago, Federal Executive Council approved a revised approval threshold for the various levels within government, which means that more can be done faster without everything having to go to the BPP and to the Federal Executive Council. We think all of these measures will fast-track the utilization of the funds. At 31st of March, whatever is left, we'll pull it back, and then we can reapply it to capital projects for 2022.
But, Honorable Minister, we cannot really shy away from the issue of borrowing, as you mentioned, which is still an integral part of the budget, and of course, it serves a lot in trying to get infrastructure on the ground and get things moving. We cannot run away from Nigeria's sentiments about these borrowings. There have been talks and complaints and criticisms about all this issue of borrowing. But as you said, they are meant for, projects that will really yield revenue and, of course, try to put the economy in good shape. Tell us more about this. How is it going? What would you tell Nigerians about your consistent or, insisting on borrowing instead of trying to look inwards and then see what Nigerians can really give in their own contribution from the private sector than having to be going out to borrow.
But not that, but we are looking inwards.
Yeah.
And because we are looking inwards, we're seeing revenues picking up. But the rate at which revenues are picking up is not at the same rate at which we need to actually expend. Even at 17.1 trillion, we're still under 10% of the GDP of this country. Ideally, for an economy the size of Nigeria, government should be spending at least 20% of its GDP to make very significant impact within the economy. So we do need to continue to spend and to expand our expenditure as we're trying to get more Nigerians to pay taxes, because that's one sore point as well. People complain we're borrowing, yet people don't want to pay taxes. People will find every means within which to evade paying of taxes. That's why, and even international companies that are operating and providing digital services in Nigeria, so all the Amazons, the Facebook, the Twitters of this world, they operate and have very large customer base in Nigeria, but we don't get any revenues from them. So the Finance Act 2021, the one that is just signed, has made some additional, so in the 2020 Finance Act, we made provisions to tax the digital economy. But we found we couldn't implement that provision, so we had to reinforce that provision in the current Finance Act. That will now enable us have the those companies provide VAT for services they provide to Nigeria, so that the customer they are serving pays this consumption tax, and then they remit to us. We're not asking that they have to register in Nigeria. We're just saying for Nigerian customers, charge the Nigerian VAT rate 7.5%, remit the funds to government. And also the Finance Act has also makes provision for FIRS to be able to access ICT systems of companies operating in Nigeria, to be able to ensure that the tax compliance status of companies are what they are supposed to be. But at the same time, also the Finance Act made a provision to impose confidentiality requirements on the FIRS and its staff, so that the information they access will not be abused in any way. So we're using automation. It's improving efficiencies in compliance at both the FIRS as well as the Nigerian Customs Service. This compliance will naturally increase the revenues that we're working on increasing.
I'd like to look at some of the assumptions or benchmarks vis-a-vis the projection for capital expenditure projection. And just for you to like to explain, give us more insight why that happened. Because, simple economics will tell you if you're expecting more, foreign exchange, more revenue in terms of, higher foreign exchange. If you're expecting more, money from oil benchmark, increased oil benchmark, of course you should have more capital expenditure. The oil benchmark was, increased to 62. From 50-something, naira per barrel, and you're also having exchange rate of 410, if I'm correct. Now these are increases. So one would expect a commensurate increase in capital expenditure.
Oh, well, that's exactly what happened. The capital expenditure did increase. The National Assembly revised the benchmark because in their own assessment we were too pessimistic. They looked at the current crude oil market prices that were ranging at an average of about $72 per barrel at the time that they took that decision. They thought we should be able to increase the price, and they did. And they also increased the capital projects as a result of that increase in prices. They did.
Okay, and let's switch over to Walek and then hear your own views about the Appropriation Act 2022. At least you've been a tracker, you've been tracking these events all through. And let's hear let's have your views. about the Appropriation, Act 2022 vis-a-vis the performance of 2021, because that is where we are coming from, and here we are in 2022.
Yeah, thank you. Permit me to start on a commendation note. That's to commend the FG for some of the public financial management reforms that have been implemented, which to me appear to be a major legacy of the administration. The prominent one is this, realignment of the calendar year with the, the fiscal year, or the fiscal year with the calendar year. Make a commitment to, returning to a predictable January to December, fiscal years. That's very important. That's important because you see, government expenditure represents just about 10% of GDP, but it's a major accelerator of economic entities' plans. Whether firms, whether individuals, including subnationals. Subnational state governments depend on what the federal government assumptions to also plan their budget. So, and that's why I think it's a major feat that we've been able to have that alignment. Some people had said, why did the president sign the Appropriation Bill when he knew that there were amendments, or when he had reservations? So why sign when you had those reservations? But of course, if he had not done that, we would have gone back to the situation we were in 2017. I recall in 2017, the 2017 Appropriation Bill, just because of a $2 increase in the oil price benchmark from $42.5 to $44.5 that the National Assembly had then, there was this face-off between the executive and the National Assembly, which delayed the passage and also the assent. So that budget didn't take off till June of 2017, and of course it took a huge toll, on the economy. I think we've learned our lessons, and it's a good thing that the president signed. Of course, he says that he will still revert to them, which is better. He now send amendments or environment requests. That means moving from one's expenditure head to another. So I think that's a better approach. So I think it's a major, achievement on the part of this administration. The other one also has to do with this reduction in the, if you like, over-reliance on oil revenue. Just as we have had, the oil revenue is only accounting for 35%. Non-oil is the bulk of it. And we also saw that in the performance of the 2021 budget. Again, as we've had, from customs, from VAT, from companies' income tax, there were positive, variances, budget variances, as opposed to the one for non-oil. So it's important that going forward, we should continue to focus on non-oil, because oil is not something you can, predict. Oil revenue you can't predict. Okay. Now the other one too I want to point out is this idea of integrating the budget of government agencies, government enterprises rather. There's 63 of them, including the budget of Debt Fund. So they have all now been integrated into this budget, and that speaks to transparency, speaks to accountability, and I think it's also something that should be sustained. And then finally is this issue of accompanying the Appropriation Bill with the Finance Bill. So now the Finance Act comes out with the Appropriation Act, okay, which makes a lot of sense. So it doesn't make sense to introduce some of these changes in the middle of the year. It doesn't help planning. Now, for example, businesses know that those producing carbonated drinks know that they are required to pay 10 naira per liter, for each carbonated drink. That's talking about the sugar tax. Okay. Investors also know that if they dispose of shares in companies, and it is in excess of 100 million, for example, okay, that the proceeds will, the gain made from that will suffer 10%, CGT. But of course, there is an incentive there that once it is reinvested, okay, you don't pay CGT 10%. So of course, that is meant to encourage, longer-term investments in the equities market. The point I made about timing, budgets coming out in good time, okay, we saw evidence of that, as a matter of fact, on the 31st of December, when the president signed the Appropriation Bill. Okay, the stock market had the highest gain for the month of December, 2.16%. So that's to tell you that it rubs off positively, on the economy generally. But I also want to mention that, there are still concerns. One of the concerns is even what the Honorable Minister has admitted to, which is the fact that recurrent spending is still high, it's still on the high side, even though over time gradually it's been it's coming down. Of course, the bulk of it remains, personnel costs. A major concern for me has to do with this issue of debt service. And that's because it's not about what we even provide in the budget. Okay, for example, for 2022 budget, what has been provided is 3.6 trillion, for debt service, which represents 34% of GDP. Okay, you would say that's normal. That's still within at least international threshold. Okay, but when you look at the actual performance, it is the actual performance that that gives concern. In 2021, for example, so far we are having 76% debt service to revenue ratio. Okay, so as opposed to what was initially provided. So there has to be a way of ensuring that debt service to revenue stays within what has been provided. If we're able to do 34% as provided in this budget for 2022, then that shouldn't be a problem. But the fear is it may not always be the case. Most of the time you find debt service to revenue ratio, the actual, becoming you have adverse variances when you talk about debt service to revenue ratio, which is where I would like the government to pay closer attention to. We are spending so much service in revenue. In 2021, going by that presentation, the government aggregate revenue up to November, prorated, was 5.5 trillion. But we spent over 4 trillion. So when you put that on 5.5, you have 76%. So you are spending so much, servicing debt. So it's a major concern.
All right, let's bring in Professor Gafar Ijaya, a development economist from the University of Ilorin. Prof, once again, good to have you with us on the program. I know you've been listening, but let's also have your perspective about the Appropriation Act 2022. Is it one that you think will be capable of driving the provisions of the NDA?
Yeah.
Development plan, rather.
I didn't hear you clearly. The network seems to be a bit bad, but...
Okay, my question is, if you look at the totality of the budget and, of course, the assumptions, your opening, remarks, do you think this is one that will drive the provisions of the development plan?
To some extent, but I have some reservations, over time, especially when we look at the assumptions that we will continue to use, in preparing our budget. At times when I continue to see the use of oil production and then the oil price, I begin to wonder. Because this is a product that you discover that, we don't have much power over. It's a product that is usually determined by the buyer, even not for the cartel that was formed way back in the 1970s. The critical situation we definitely find ourselves. Professor Uche, let me align with him. There's the need to look at the solid mineral sector. I remember I was born in a tin mining company, and I know how much tin and columbite have done, in the Jos area in the 60s, 70s. Why don't we go and begin to look at these solid minerals, because they fetch more money than even the oil we talk about. So that is one of my concerns. Another of my concerns with the assumptions we adopt over time is the continued use of dollar, to benchmark our exchange rate. Even having known that, the bulk of imports come from China, for instance. There was a time the central bank talks about, Nigerians, swapping to using the Chinese currency. And up to now, we've not heard much about it. I think good, but one should commend this government at least for trying to incorporate, a development plan for it, a 5-year development. Brought in the Sustainable Development Plan or Sustainable Economic Development Plan, to address especially the COVID situation. So I think, bringing a 5-year development plan that will be used to drive this budget is a welcome development. You discover that, there's within and outside. But I think the one that is more critical is the external shock, which people don't consider, because whether we like it or not, and if we don't know, the impact of COVID is so enormous. I'll tell you that from discussions, more than 70% of the crisis we are having today in this country, especially the one that have to do with the economy, is basically, mostly because of the COVID, the pandemic, we experienced. And my other concern actually is, the implementation, yes, but I think people should not continue to emphasize the implementation of our budget. One other aspect that we never talk about is the monitoring and evaluation of, even the projects we use this money for. Yes, some will say that the National Assembly is there through their oversight functions. They can also, monitor and see how this budget is implemented. That I can say we can take as, an external way, of trying to. But within the MDAs, I think there is the need for the MDAs to strengthen their monitoring and evaluation units. But again, there are a lot of concern too when you look at it from that point, given our human character and human nature, and whether we like it or not, the institutional weakness or weaknesses that we experience over time, that rules, procedures, for doing things are not followed, in total, also affect, how we drive our budget. And given also the character of, some of our policymakers or people who are put in position to implement this budget, I think we need to look at it critically, because it's very important. As laudable as the budget is, as laudable as the plan is, if you don't have, people of good character to drive and, of high value to drive your budget or to drive your project, definitely, there'll be a problem. Thank you.
Professor Gafari Jai. Honorable Minister, some concerns have been raised here, starting from Waleke here talking about, debt servicing ratio, and down to Gafar talking about, as we started talking, looking at internally, internal ways of internal generated revenue, how to get much more of that. Is specifically talking about solid minerals, and then continued use of the dollar as a benchmark currency instead of the yen, which we, jumped up to when the president much earlier in around 2016-17 talked about the yen as bulk of our trade, is with China. Now, these are concerns raised, and these are issues that need to be explained.
Well, and these are very valid concerns. We ourselves are concerned about the debt service to revenue ratio. So when we did the budget for 2022, for example, we said debt service is 21% of the size of the budget. It also means that the assumption is your revenue would perform 100%. So once your revenue doesn't perform at 100%, the ratio rises. And that's why we're saying our problem is actually revenue, revenue, and revenue. We all need to find ways and means of how we can continuously increase this revenue. Because we've sat back, we said, can we reduce the level of our capital expenditure? No, it is still quite low compared to the size of our economy. We cannot reduce our staff cost because the president has made a commitment that he will not disengage staff. We must pay pensions, and we also must service our debts, both the current ones we're taking as well as the ones that we inherited. Nigerians forget to give us credit for actually maintaining debt service. When we go to the capital market, whether it is the domestic or international capital market, our offerings are oversubscribed. And the reason is people are seeing the real fundamentals behind the economy and also the commitment to service debt. Because I'm giving you my money as a loan, I have to be assured that you will pay. Because we have never failed in debt service. That's why our sukuk, which would just close at the end of December, was about 450% oversubscribed. That's why when we went out for the Eurobond, we're looking for $3 billion US dollars. We ended up with about $12 billion US dollars. And this is an external community. So there are people, investors that are savvy, that are seeing the potential of this economy. And once we're able to continue to increase our revenues on a basis that is really large, not small increases, the debt service burden will cease to be a problem. When we get to the point when our revenue to GDP moves from the current 9% to 15%, we will not be groaning under the burden of services. So for me, the biggest problem we have now is revenue, and where we feel it is actually on debt service. Because when you have to now take the largest proportion of your revenue to service debt, it affects the other things that you also have to do, or it compels you to borrow more because you must make sure that everything in government is running smoothly. On the issue of the use of the oil dollar, I appreciate what Mr. Ghaffar is saying, but this oil and gas industry is an asset that we have. Are we just going to throw it away because we can't control the price in the market? It's an asset that we have. We've invested in this industry for over 50 years. We're reaping the benefits of the investments that we have made. So we cannot do a budget without considering the contributions of the oil and gas industry. Yes, we are not in control of the price. That's why on the fiscal side, our assumptions are always very, very pessimistic. That's why our assumption was $57 per barrel, when we know that the market was over $70 per barrel. But the National Assembly has adjusted it. But even then at 62, when the market is almost at 80 today, it's still very, very pessimistic. But we're also in control of production, which means the whole of the oil and gas industry, NNPC and its affiliates and the oil sector must produce to the capacity that we have. We have a total combined capacity of 2.5 million barrels per day in this country. And the NNPC tells us that as at December, they were able to produce 1.7. We had some challenges during the course of the year. There were some months that it went down to 1.5. picked up, and now it's at around 1.7. So we must make sure that production is stable and sustained. And it has been stable for quite some time, except for the last 3 months that the oil company had a problem. In terms of mineral revenue, there's a lot of attention also on mineral revenue. I'm sure you've seen the meeting that the president had, that he was briefed on the gold mining at some mining scheme. The solid minerals revenue today, so when I do my report on revenues, the solid minerals contribution is 0.005%. So it's not as if there's no revenue coming from the mining sector, but because the activities are largely illegal. Government is not getting the benefit of the revenues that we should have gotten from that sector. We're seeing very little royalties. We're seeing no taxes, except for the companies like Ashaka Cement and Dangote that are mining limestone for their cement, Lafarge for their cement industry. We are seeing very little or no taxes. So there's a whole ministry that is dedicated at driving growth. And what they've concentrated in doing is the geological surveys that are required by investors to be able to make an investment decision making in the country. Because it's not government that will develop that sector. We have to be able to attract a Rio Tinto or one such large mining company. Once you are able to attract one large one, others will follow. And that's the principle that the Ministry of Mines and Steel Development is working on, producing all these 3D, 4D studies, quantifying, identifying where special minerals are located and the volumes and the quality of the minerals. And we're getting nearer to that point when we'll be able to attract a large investor. That is when the change will come in terms of performance of the mining sector. And on the currency swap with between Nigeria and China, it has not worked the way Nigerians had expected, but it is still working. Not at the maybe it wasn't even presented well enough for people to understand what it was. What it is that you're able to order goods from China and pay the Chinese currency, instead of paying to dollar and then converting to the Chinese. So people that are doing large volume trades in Nigeria through the official banking channels are taking advantage of that. So the currency swap is still in place. It's working. Maybe the volumes will, over time, increase and more Nigerian companies will be able to...
Minister, I'm not cutting you short. Let me just add to that the issue of this currency swap, can there be any improved way of trying to make Nigerians appreciate the fact that this is beneficial to both countries and to both parties? It's now not really at a very high level because there is more or less little or very less or very small education on that. Can there be anything that can be done by the government in order to improve that?
I think there is a lot that can be done, and I'm sure the monetary authorities are also looking very much at that, because this has now been going on for some time. Like I said, maybe the line of credit, so it's like having a credit line that you can trade up to a certain volume. Maybe they will be reviewing and increasing that volume, and also perhaps reducing the requirements for complying to be able to participate in that scheme. I will say that the monetary authorities are in the best position to provide what needs to be done going forward to expand that scheme. On the concern that has also been raised on the issue of monitoring and evaluation, that again is a very, very valid concern. So we've been attempting to so the National Assembly does their oversight. That's one, that's given. The Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning has a national monitoring and evaluation unit that is responsible for national monitoring and evaluation. And we do this monitoring and report on an annual basis on performance of major government programs and projects. But we're not able to cover all programs and projects. So what we're doing now is upgrading our systems and putting in place an automated platform that is called the iMonitor, that is going to enable Nigerian citizens to also participate and take part in the monitoring. So you'll be able to download an app on your hand device or any mobile device. You'll be able to go to anywhere within the country, inspect a project, send a picture of the project and your comments or questions on that monitor. So it's expanding our reach using Nigerians as a tool. But also the Budget Office of the Federation has a quarterly monitoring and evaluation report that is posted on the website of the Budget Office. They also routinely go out for project inspection. But again, those visits are limited because they can't go everywhere within the country. They also have they call it an eye monitor, a budget monitor that you can also report on as a citizen. If you go to the website, you can actually type in your comments or questions and get feedback. So the feedback is either from the Budget Office itself, or they connect to the ministry or agency that has the project and ask for a response and send it back. So we're trying to do more.
Yes, Honourable Minister, thank you. When we come back from a short break, I would like us to look at how, we intend to deal with the challenging area, that's revenue generation, because that is important, again, to fund the budget and also to service our debts. This is Good Morning Nigeria. We're taking a short break. We'll be right back.
From the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
The NOA, for example, has succeeded a great deal in sensitization during the pandemic, and we have found the community mobilization officers most effective in the sensitization and in the advocacy campaigns, creating awareness on the coronavirus pandemic. We have done this through the production of jingles, which were very widely distributed in different languages, in English, in Hausa, in Yoruba, in Igbo, in Tiv, in Igala, in Kanuri, in Fulfulde, in Ijo, in Isoko, in Bini. In talk of any other language you can think of, we had translated sensitization messages.
This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The African Cup of Nations starts on the 9th of January 2022 on NTA, powered by Afrosports. For sponsorship and advertisements, contact us on 090-9890-6913 or 090-3513-2838.
All right, welcome back. Let's quickly commence our conversation, the second part. And I'd just like for us, again, maybe I will start with the Honourable Minister to speak briefly on it, and then we escalate it to the other two guests. The concerns raised about debt profile, has also been observed by international financial institutions, and I know the papers are carrying sorts of caution and issues raised about that and impact on the quality of life for Nigerians. Now, the minister has assured us that the deficit will be financed from two major sources, loans and domestic sources. Now, my question to you will be, do we have, I'm looking for the right word now, the conducive policy environment that will be attractive for investment, especially for our local manufacturers? Are there incentives for them, to latch on, to be able to produce for import? For exports, rather.
Okay, well, let me just step back a bit and again just join you to re-emphasize that we all in government and we all as Nigerians are concerned about the borrowings that government has been doing. But again, we continuously, and I'm again restating that our debt levels are within sustainable limits, that the challenge that we have is that of revenue. So as we work to increase revenue, we are also working to cut out any wasteful expenditure, because cutting the size of expenditure itself is currently not a viable option. So we're trying to rationalize the expenditure to reduce waste, and the reality is that the fiscal challenge that we have must be where all our efforts are targeted on. We have to grow our revenue from 9% of GDP to 15% of GDP. That is when things will become healthy for us as a country. And what have we done in terms of revenue? We have designed a program since 2019 that we call the Strategic Revenue Growth Initiative. So it's an initiative that was the first thing that I did in the Ministry of Finance as we all agreed that the major challenge we need to focus on our revenue. The SRGI is designed to be able to optimize the revenue within the whole of the revenue ecosystem, that is maximizing existing revenue streams, improving compliance, and also ensuring cohesion between all the agencies that are working within the revenue ecosystem. So as a result of that, we determined that we need to find how we can increasingly improve on our fiscal regime, and that's why we have the Finance Act. So it sprang up from the SRGI. We also determined that we needed to increase our VAT rate. That's how we increased VAT from 5 to 7.5. 7.5%, by the way, is still the lowest in Africa today, and 7.5% is about 50% of the Africa average, Sub-Saharan Africa average, which is currently 15%. So we're still very, very low.
Are you contemplating?
We are still, yes, we have to increase VAT at some time going forward. We cannot stay at 7.5% when we want to increase our revenue and we want to expand our expenditure at some point. I'm not saying this year because we didn't make a provision. We didn't make any provision because there are all these contentions between federal and state government. So we stayed clear of VAT until things are clear. We also are not looking at increasing company income tax, but we must be increasing some levies and especially excise duties. We started by making a provision in the Finance Act 2021 for excise duties on carbonated drinks. And so that has a dual purpose. It will help to increase revenue, but also reduce health challenges such as obesity and diabetes and such like challenges that are caused by high intake of sugar. So if you're producing drinks and your sugar content is low, you will not be suffering from you will not be suffering from some of those taxes. We also looked at the capital market and said that some of the relief that used to be in the market, which was meant to encourage the growth of the market, such as capital allowances, which, by the way, almost every market in the world charges, we have not been charging for a very long time, I think 10 years or so now. And we have now introduced capital gains tax on disposal of investments, but over 100 million. Why 100 million? So that smaller investors are protected. But you only suffer that tax when you exit, when you take your money out of the investment. If you reinvest, there's a reinvestment relief. So that is also supposed to encourage longer term investments. We have a lot of portfolio investors that fly into our country and fly out. They come when the market is good, take the profit and just go away. So we're trying, those are the target. Our target was actually 500 million, but the National Assembly in its wisdom reduced that to 100 million. But it's also a a good start. We're encouraging investments. At the same time, we're going to get some incremental revenue. So we're looking at various ways to enhance compliance of tax, and that's why we have the provision of enabling, emphasizing the FIRS is the Supreme Revenue Collection Authority. Is been provided in the law that every agency of government that collects revenue must comply with the provisions of Constitution. That is to say, all revenues must come to the Consolidated Revenue Fund, and from there, whatever is approved for you will go out from that central point. It will give us visibility, and it will also block a lot of leakages. Also, the Act provides FIRS to be able to get into ICT systems to assess the tax compliance of companies. All of these are measures that will eventually result in increased revenue. For the
you just told us that the issue of cutting staff is ruled out.
Mr. President doesn't want to disengage.
So no sacking of workers.
That is what he has directed from the beginning of his administration. He also directed that you must pay salaries. Like, okay, I don't care how you do it, but you must pay salaries. So the federal government has never failed in paying salaries, and he said you must also pay pensions. So he's been consistent in those directives, and we have followed those directives to the letter.
So what do you intend to do with your bloated personnel costs?
Well, we do hope that at the end of the exercise that some agencies will be merged and fused, and it will cut down operational costs, and also that we'll be able to come up with incentive packages to retrain people and redeploy them where, in some areas where there are needs. For example, we still have a very high need for teachers, so we could retrain people and send them to teach, but also incentive packages to exit. But again, that is also money. If you want people to exit, you have to pay them that incentive package so that they go. So that's why it's taking a lot of time, because it's not easy to decide on this. And everything centers around you need resources to be able to do that. So if we had a lot of money, we just give very beautiful incentive packages, and people will exit and go and start their businesses.
Sure.
And we'll reduce the size of the personal cost.
Sure. Thank you so much, Madam Minister. Let's hear from Professor Gafro, therefore, about this aspect of the budget, which is the Finance Act. The main thrust of the Finance Act has been revenue and revenue and revenue, just mobilization, revenue mobilization, and data enforcement, tax administration, and some legislative drafts. It also includes some international, taxes, as being alluded to by the Honorable Minister here. Professor Gafro, how do you see this playing out and trying to improve the revenue for the federal government for it to have much more to implement its budget?
Yeah, I think it's quite a welcome development. The Act, when I went through it, I saw just the usual Nigerian, you definitely see the best when it comes to policy formulation. And I think where the problem will actually come is when we have to implement these things. For instance, let me just take let's say the personal income tax, for instance. You discover that a lot of Nigerians are not within the tax net, especially those who operate in the informal sector. And again, you discover also that there are rules if you avoid tax or evade tax. In the 60s, 70s, when we were young, we say in Jos, for instance, we've seen people go to jail, for evading or avoiding tax. But in Nigeria today, I hardly see that being done. And in other climes, you know what it takes. If we evade tax in Germany, in UK, so that is a big concern, and there is a need for government to also address that, And you look at it, I discover that even those who evade tax mostly, are the political elite. I can't imagine an election should show evidence of 3 years of tax, or I don't know, because what has happened to the other years? So I think there's a need we address this issue of tax, especially the personal income tax, even the company tax. As a young boy in the tea mining company in Jos, we witnessed where companies for not paying for not remitting their workers' taxes, and for also not paying their taxes, were shut down. How many today of these companies do you find being shut down if they don't pay their taxes? I think since there are rules and there are laws, we need to implement those laws. We need to let it work so that Nigerians can, revenue can come in as much as we want. For cutting expenditure, the Honorable Minister, did mention, government possibility of merging some, parastatals agencies of government. This has been the pronouncement all over. There's a need for action. We know a committee was set up some time ago to look at these things. Why should we continue to delay this and continue to make pronouncements without taking action? I think it's very important because there are lots of duplications. When you look at some of these agencies, what they do. So, and since this has been identified, why don't we just, have that political will to take the action and do the needful? If really we want to have as much money in our coffer to implement our project. Thank you.
All right, Professor Ijaya, thank you very much for your contribution. I'd like to put my question to Professor Uche Uwaleke, and again, it's on where do we get the money to fund the budget? Where do we get the money to offset our debt profile? And you heard the Honourable Minister, speak to the areas projected. But I'm asking, given the huge personnel cost and its, input in the recurrent expenditure, is not, cutting down, well, that's the President's directive, but is it inevitable? And what impact do you think merging of, parastatals and MDs, according to the Rosanye, paper, what impact do you think that will have?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think if we look critically at the recurrent spending, particularly the personnel cost, I agree that this is not the time to lay off workers. But if we look at it critically, we may also see one or two areas that we can, save some money. You look at the defense budget, for example. Defense budget, total defense budget, 2.2 trillion. About 13% of the budget size. That's the bulk of it. And you compare that with a budget for infrastructure. Under infrastructure, you have power, you have works, you have housing, you have transport, you have water resources, you have aviation. All of that took just 1.4 billion. And defense, 2 billion. So but infrastructure, 8%.
But security is very...
No, very critical. What I'm saying is, even in that defense, you find that it is the recurrent portion that is the bulk of
taking the chunk.
Yes, it's not even the... It's not as if you're spending money buying
some hardware.
So it is a recurrent. So that's why I think the government shouldn't relent. This IPPIS is good. They shouldn't relent in using technology, biometrics, or whatever to really reduce the personnel costs. While I was a commissioner for finance in my state, we did that, and we of course that paid off. That's one. Now, the other thing I need to mention quickly is to lend voice to what the Honourable Minister said. The area of Finance Act. She talked about this incentive for the capital market. I just want to add a few more. The Finance Act also has incentive for securities lending, okay, as well as real estate investment trusts. Okay, what it says there is that withholding tax on real estate investment trusts or companies will be considered as final, and that's important. It's important because when investors in such companies, receive dividends, they don't also suffer, double tax, as it were. So, and I would like to also see maybe in the Finance Act of 2022, further incentives that will encourage, the growth of the capital market. And I say that because you realize that the bulk of the company's income tax that we get in Nigeria today, FIRS records will tell you, come from companies that are listed on the exchange, the bulk of it. So that tells you that the more we incentivize companies to list, it is a win-win thing for the government. The government will also get more revenue, because you ask the question, where will the money come? So one way we can do that, while we are looking at rebalancing the tax mix in favor of indirect tax or consumption tax, in line with the is in line with the tax policy, the government's tax policy, because she talked about possible increase in VAT. We should also be thinking about also reducing the company's income tax, particularly for quoted companies, as an incentive. You can say, for example, that if you're a company and you list on the exchange, the first 1 year you list, you don't pay tax. You have a tax holiday. So that will encourage people to come and list.
Okay.
Or you even say companies that are listed will now pay 29% tax.
All right.
Others will pay tax. Again, as an incentive for people to list. And the more people list, the more the accounts are open.
We're not talking about production here. We're not talking about producing for export.
No, that's when we have more companies list on the exchange, and these companies raise funds in the market. They raise long-term funds. They use that for production.
Because a lot of manufacturers,
they use that for production.
Companies are down.
That's what I'm saying. The banks will not give you long-term loans. Those long-term funds will come from the capital market. That's the link. That's the point I'm trying to make. So, permit me to also say a few things. One, on the issue of budget monitoring, I want to commend the ministry for that. The iMonitor, trying to now involve the citizens. It is important that a lot of awareness is created around the iMonitor and the issue of budget monitoring app. I saw that in the presentation, and I said that's a very good one. But the second thing too is the ministry should also work to ensure that the reports of the Auditor General for the Federation, that they are implemented. Auditor General's reports for several years have not been implemented. That is a major component of a budget control and budget implementation. Okay, and as part of the Strategic Revenue Growth Initiative, the government should also, look at some innovative revenue or project financing schemes, such as securitization. I have not seen them talk about securitization. Securitize cash flows from government projects and make them tradable as securities.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor Wadeke. We're running short of time. It's really enemy this morning, and we have much more to talk about. But nonetheless, we'll give the Honorable Minister maybe some 60 seconds to, maybe talk to Nigerians about this 2022 Appropriation Act and the Finance Bill, and what each and every one of us need to know and need to do in order to see to it that it becomes really successful.
Maybe we should look at the private sector, because we're told that they are to contribute 398 trillion naira to the yes.
Okay.
Briefly, we have less than 60 seconds.
All in 60 seconds. But I must address the issue of security. It's important for us to, and we have made some progress in security. We did a supplementary budget last year just to fund very major equipping of the security agencies. We need to sustain the spending to make sure that the security agencies are well equipped and also well incentivized to do the work that they are doing on our behalf. And I also note we started working more closely with the Auditor General of the Federation to implement those reports that will enhance compliance. All we're doing in terms of reviewing fiscal laws, in terms of the Presidential Enabled Business Council, we reviewed CAMA. All of it is with a view of enhancing businesses in Nigeria. Even the Finance Act made very special, copious provisions to favor the micro, small, medium enterprise. So we continue to focus on the small businesses, because that is where the employment numbers that we need to improve on will come from. And to all Nigerians, we have a major problem, which is revenue, but we also have a very significant challenge in terms of Nigerians owning up to their responsibilities and being up and doing to pay their taxes. People simply don't want to pay their taxes unless they have no choice that they have to. So please, Nigerians, pay your taxes. It pays to pay your taxes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure they know. I'm sure we all know. Nadabo.
Everybody knows that, really. It's the tax money that you are using in order to get these infrastructure facilities on the ground. Well, thank you so much, Honorable Minister, Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Samshuna Ahmed. It's our pleasure and wish you all the best.
Thank you very much for having me.
The Chairman, Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, Abuja branch, and former Commissioner of Finance, Imo State, Professor Uche Waleke. It's our pleasure. You'll always be here.
Thank you.
Hope to see more of you.
Thank you.
Professor Gafar Ijai, it's our pleasure. Thank you so much for being part of this program this morning. And that's Good Morning Nigeria for you today. Join us again tomorrow for another episode. I am Yusuf Nadab Usman.
I am Claire.